Thanks. Okay, just one more time. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Thank you in the back. I'm going to take my mask off. I hope you're okay with that. Thank you for the very kind introduction. I didn't realize we bored you with a biography in the program. I'll never do that to you again. My name is Ryan Janovic, and I'm really excited to be here. So Mark, to you, to the entire leadership team, Joy, thanks for helping us get in here. For everybody, BSidesAugusta. Here's what I knew about it. They said, hey, sir, will you speak at BSides? Absolutely, I'm in. With not a lot of knowledge of what that meant. But I was eager based on who asked me and the fact that it came from the team here at BSides. Then they came back and said, yeah, it's the keynote, it's about an hour long. Well, are you talking to me? Who talks for an hour? Maybe I will today, maybe I won't. We'll see how this goes, but my memory of BSides, right? The term for me means perhaps something different. I look around, I'm of the older crowd in the room, right? Who has 45s at home? Albums of vinyl, right? Okay, so you had the little adapter. We know what BSides are. That's not what we're talking about here. What happened in Vegas didn't stay in Vegas. Augusta is now the third, I understand, large organization gathering. And I think that speaks volumes not only about you, who you are, your innovative spirit, but it speaks a little bit about the magnetism of Augusta. There are some good things going on in Augusta, Georgia. Some great things happening up on Fort Gordon, some great things happening in the community. It crosses the river. So that is why I'm excited. And there are some things that I've learned in the couple years I've been up at Fort Gordon. I'll tell you this, I've learned more in the last 2 years of being here than I did in the first 3. I was here in 1994 to 97. I didn't leave here in 97 thinking I would be back, and I certainly didn't believe I'd be back to witness the growth and explosion of what's happening in Augusta, Georgia, in the cyber community, and in the work that we all do together, both privately, academia, and in industry as well as the government. So today I have a few goals. If I can help open up a day of technology, innovation, discussion, you could feel it in the room outside. If I can help open that up, I'm all for it. I'll try to do 3 things well. I'll talk a little bit about what I've seen in terms of the growth of what's going on in cyber. General Fogarty is my current boss, Lieutenant General Fogarty. He was here 6 years ago as Major General Fogarty, standing up here as a speaker. And at that time, the cyber branch in the Army was 1 year old. By way of example, yesterday, the Army Cyber Organization celebrated its 11th anniversary. So I want to talk a little bit about the change because I think it's important. I want to highlight a little bit of what I've learned leading a technical organization. So I'm going to spend a little part in the middle of this discussion today, hopefully the meat of the discussion, providing you my reflections on what I've learned about leading a technical organization. I grew up as an intelligence officer. I'm not suggesting that that is not technical or there weren't hard problems to solve in the intelligence field, but I've had to challenge some of my preconceived notions and assumptions about the force that I'm honored to be a part of and lead. And I think, and I hope, that some of those observations have parallels in your world and will hopefully be helpful. Whether you are new to that organization, are charged with leading it, have been around it, or are new to it and coming from the outside of it. And then finally, a little bit of a reflection about what's going on in the world, if you will. The world that we work in cyber, the threat actors that are our adversaries working against us, how they might be doing that, and close with some challenges where I think we could use your help in the future. Closing with those challenges in order to suggest that as you go out today and talk deeper, more deeply about the technology behind some of it, the innovative spirit, what hackers are into, what problems are the most vexing that you're going to center around and solve. Maybe some of those things are things we, the Army Cyber, could work with you on in the future. because I think it's clear to all of us in the room that things that are happening against us are not solely isolated against the government, are not solely isolated against the private sector, and there is certainly bleed over and national security risk associated with all of that. So those are my goals. I hope to do it in a way that keeps people excited. I know some people in the room. If one of them falls asleep, I won't be surprised. It happens to me every day of the week with a few of these characters that are here. I do recognize some other faces. I'd be remiss if I didn't suggest that I've also been introduced to people already today who are legends in your field. So I arrive very humbled to be in the room. If I can help kick this thing off, I'll be very happy. I had to take off some of the bling I was starting to earn. I brought some of my own, however. So as we move forward here, participation could get you something in return. It's not a trick. It's not a recruiting tool. There are no re-enlistment forms in my bag, although I do have some in my truck. So we could get a lot done if we had to there. Okay, I'm in charge of that. Here we go. Can anybody tell me, and you can use devices, can anybody tell me what any one of those numbers mean relative to the topic I'm speaking on? Because I'm sure they could be applied to anything. Okay? All you have to do at this point now is raise your hand and guess. Yes? Okay, which number are you choosing? Okay, so let's see what I got. You can pick between medium and large. What's that? Well, you can give it away. It says R Cyber. Here you go. Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having the courage to raise your hand. I would not have. Anybody else with that introduction? Yes, sir. If that's true, we got a bigger problem than I thought. He left you with a t-shirt, medium, coffee mug. And it says at the bottom, this is an antique, it says attack, defend, exploit, Army Cyber. We've changed that a little bit, but who doesn't like to exploit? Thank you, sir. How about one more? Yes? Oh, do you work in said headquarters? Okay, meet me halfway. You're going to get the remaining t-shirt and 2 monster drinks. The beverage of choice in the building that you rightfully identified.
I brought one with me.
Yeah, well now you can share with a friend. And I do have locks I brought. I'm not sure what that's all about, but I have a couple. Now I know. We'll pick some locks later. These numbers speak to me. Where the military, where the Army, where the Department of Defense invests its money and builds infrastructure, you can see its priorities. And in this case, what we're talking about, $1.6 billion, is the investment in the new cyber campus portrayed in those renderings that is being built on Fort Gordon, Georgia now. If you've been up there, there's a big crane sitting next to Signal Towers. Signal Towers was there when I moved on 1994. I never imagined, we tried to put a military intelligence banner over it and play pranks on it, and we wanted to paint the water tower or get rid of the semaphore flags. Well, all that's kind of happening. And it's happening because of a significant investment in the Cyber Center of Excellence being at Fort Gordon, Georgia. When General Fogarty spoke here 6 years ago, that vision was coming to life. This building that he has recently occupied, I'll show you in the next picture, right? That is coming to life. the Cyber Center of Excellence coming to life. Signal towers, regrettably, but necessarily, will come down and new will erupt. And so there's a lot going on. 336, we'll talk about 16,000 a year is the number of students that pass through the gates of Fort Gordon to get trained in cyber and signal. That's significant throughput. So there's Paul Kraft running the cyber school as an example, teaching the newest formations, creating new formations, and putting them down at the lowest echelons of our Army, in addition to those that come fight with us inside of Army Cyber. 10,500, the size of the Army Cyber organization. That's military and civilian, about half military, half civilian. And that's in the military, that's across all three what we call compos. That's active duty force, National Guard, and Reserve. So we're the newest branch in our Army, but we're growing significantly. And then 1.4 million. Anyone want that one? Yeah. No. Well, no. What can I give away? I can give you my locks. I owe you something. I'll take care of that. That is, that's the size of the network we in the Army are charged to defend. 1.4 million endpoints without mobile devices across 5 continents. Significant work. And so when I talk about being world-class, it's not just about buildings. There's another building, okay? And it is premier and it is beautiful, which we should expect at $336 million. But it is, and it's well-equipped, as it should be, to put in the Army's cyber force. But it's a lot more than that. While it is a world-class facility, what's in it is world-class talent that we're growing, training, recruiting, sustaining, retaining, right? And that's not easy. I think all of us would agree, in whatever part of the field you're working in, that's not necessarily an easy thing. The talent competition is significant. How do you attract it? Well, the last word there, my argument would be, what we have that is powerful is our mission. Whether it's the size and scope of what we do, as evidenced by the 1.4 million endpoints, whether it's the fact that was mentioned in the kind introduction, that we can do some things that are otherwise not legal. That we are doing it in a spectrum. So from guys in coat closets, forward deployed in a very dusty area. I visited them about a month ago. We have an expeditionary cyber team. When we in the Army say expeditionary, that means Spartan. You are not eating well. Well, you're kind of eating well, depending on where you go. But you're living in plywood, perhaps. You've definitely got a roommate. You all smell bad. Your days are long. Your nights are longer. You're away from your family. We call that expeditionary. So an expeditionary cyber team, forward deployed, not working in this beautiful facility, working in the storage closet in a forward deployed location with other people's broken equipment and their little rig, doing what we've asked them to do on behalf of the commander on the ground. They are just as motivated as the men and women who work in this building because of the mission that we're asked to do. And I think that's a powerful, powerful thing. I can tell another story about why I think that mission is what makes these facilities worth the investment. In a room with no windows, you would expect us to have rooms with no windows, right? In a room with no windows during an operation, lots of folks in there. It smells like, I tell this story often, it smells like Monster. It smells like body odor. It smells like energy. I mean, there's a lot going on in here. We are crushing on a live mission. And I hear somebody who is well regarded in our force, well regarded in the field. He is what we would at the time call a junior leader, a company grade leader, but he's been around, both privately and within the Army in his work. And I hear him utter the words, "This is the best day of my Army career." And at the time, I didn't know how powerful it was. And here's what I now know. It was the best day in his Army career because we were asked to do something, to take an action that was going to have a significant effect And it was otherwise not going to happen unless we had organized the right talent in the right facility and given them the right mission and said, we need you to do this. Solve this problem and have an effect. So to me, we're very proud of what's happening up at Fort Gordon. There's a lot happening up there. When you think of the Army Cyber Formation, there are folks in the room. Raise your hands. Come on. Okay. I'm not doing that to isolate you. I want to do it because we are in this conversation, and we have talent. We want more talent. But if you want to further understand how you can connect to it, I have some ambassadors in the room. They're here on their own accord. But I think it would be great to further explore what that looks like in practice. Any questions on the numbers? Thank you for participating in the survey. That's what's going on in these buildings. Now, General Paul Stanton is running the Cyber Center of Excellence. He's doing a lot of great work with innovative things. General Paul Kraft is running the Cyber School. We are expanding how we're attracting talent. We have industry partnerships. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the middle part of the discussion. We are doing direct commissioning now. We're taking folks right out of the private sector and saying, we'll direct commission you as an officer of cyber. We have civilian summer internships that lead to further work in the government service. So we're trying to expand and grow the branch in a meaningful way. We're creating more structure, and by that, that's saying we're creating more cyber at echelon, so that at the expeditionary level, you now all know that means you're carrying everything on your back. At the expeditionary level to the $336 million building level, we are going to have cyber expertise. It'll take a while to grow it, but that is underway. So there's a lot happening within the force. A lot has happened since we last spoke to this group 6 years ago. Okay. Star Wars reference. It's a thing, right? I took off some other references. I was given a light to wear, and it's by somebody I know, and I really wasn't sure what I was wearing. So, second part of the conversation, 5 lessons, okay? Those are duffel bags. Duffel bags stacked at the National Training Center, which is a very desolate, nasty part of the California desert, that I had in 2009, 2010, training a unit to take them to Afghanistan for combat operations. I took this picture. And this picture says a lot of things to me often, but what I often think about when I look at it are the people that I was charged with leading and honored to be a part of their team. Well, one of the lessons that I've learned now, and I use this to help reflect on it as I discuss it with you today, I knew everybody in that unit. I knew their job. I had done most of their jobs or could represent them based on my own experience. I knew everything in that bag, each bag, because we told them what goes in it. So I was asked to train this unit, lead them into combat. I had to train 12 people to do one job. Usually, there's a formation and there's a team, a squad, and you're training them to do a task, and it's very well documented. Well, my lesson in cyber is that is not true. Cyber is many things. It could be what we call the work role, the task that we give you, whether you're an online operator, a hacker, whether you are a coder, a developer, whether you're a defender. It could be the organization that you're assigned to, whether you're offense, defense, development, could be doctrine, right? But that's kind of what you get from us on our table of organization, right? Our MTOs. And it could be what you get in position descriptions or hiring actions, right? Here's what we want you to do. And it defines it. I think the power is really, though, in what the passion of the people happens to be. I am into coding. I am into hacking. I am into network engineering. Knowing what the passion of the organization is really powerful. It could come down to languages. I'm a Python guy. Or down to devices, right? What do? I'm Unix, I'm Windows, right? All that's going to get talked about across the thing. So my epiphany was the organization in cyber is going to deliver you some things, but it's not going to deliver you everything. So what do you do about that? Well, what I think you do is you take inventory, right? You start to identify, what do I have? And for me, I had to display something called, my term, confident vulnerability. I did not grow up as a computer science major. I didn't grow up in the world. Confident vulnerability, how to ask questions and listen in a way that allows you to sense what's going on in that organization. Because I would then argue that the next lesson is hard problems, and we like to think in cyber we only solve hard problems, require you to rewrite that org chart, right? The hierarchy is not going to be important to solving hard problems. But yet, I would offer, cyber is not filled with the most extroverted crowd, right? So it's not naturally going to resolve itself into people coming across boundaries of the organization or out of, rooms with no windows into further rooms with no windows, or out of collaborative spaces. And it's more, in our world, I told you we outfitted the building beautifully. Everyone has monitors and we can all get on Skype chat. It's more than open bay space and monitors and being able to do Skype chat with your friends, coworkers. It's about how do you identify that you have these differences, what did you do about the inventory you took, and then crushing them together. Because problem solving, people pick the lock differently, to use the BSides reference, right? Like you've got to bring different mindsets together to solve problems. So this is my doodling. I'm a doodler. I apologize for it often. There's some people in the room that hate it. Max, as you saw, he works with me and he hates it. This was my early doodle. And this was early on in my time as part of our cyber team. What am I doing to make sure I'm drawing these folks together? Because we have hard problems and I can't look at it one way. It can't be all the defenders in one room talking about a defensive problem. That'll get you nowhere. It can't be the developers in a vacuum just developing stuff because they want to, which they will naturally do, right? If you give them some time and some money, they'll write code to solve problems that might be interesting but not important, right? It's great energy. But how do you focus that on that hard problem? And then how do you tune, most importantly, and I'll admit, we are not here yet. We have not arrived at the nirvana of, once you identify the skills and attributes of each of these people, what makes these types of folks tick? What makes a SIGINT or someone who grew up in the NSA enterprise, right, doing SIGINT work? Well, there's a mindset that comes with that. They're analytical in a certain way. They like hard problems, but they look at them differently. Developers, hackers, defenders, right? There's this group of things. How do you recruit that talent? What are the skills and attributes that I'm looking for? Well, how do you then tune what you're doing in recruitment to get that? That's a hard challenge, and I think that challenge is not unique to the government. How does any organization recruit, identify, get the right thing within it so that the inventory becomes more wholesome and more rewarding about the type of diversity of thought, diversity of background, frankly, diversity of experience in one room? And I think, hard problem. If you're not doing a hard problem, then you're probably not earning your pay, right? Like, there are enough hard problems to solve that easy ones should be someone else's work. My joke would be that's for the Navy, but I understand some of you might be associated with the Navy. That's your own fault. Okay, so obviously a picture I did not take myself. My technique, am I driving you crazy, sir, by moving? Okay. My technique has been long to use pictures I took myself because I know what they represent and I don't run afoul of infringement. But does anyone, and I don't have a prize for you, but I'll come up with one. Anyone know where this location is? Scariff. Who said that? Oh, nice. Good work. Okay, I owe you something too. Yes, it's Scariff. So what did we do? What did I learn about taking that doodle and saying, I got to crush these people together? I got to find a way to make the grassroots of this organization speak to the entirety of the organization. Well, I was in a developer's room with a bunch of, when I say developers, these are the guys that we say, hey, we need something built. Write a bunch of code that's going to solve this problem. And we spend a lot of time putting them together because the brain trust of a group of developers, we believe in the power of this kind of bring them all together, and this coalescence of developers will help us solve problems bigger. And there is truth in all of that. But you know what else? The minute you close the door, they might solve a problem that, again, is only important to them. We often would take visitors into the development room and showcase the talent and the brilliance and the capability that we had. So I'd been through there a lot with visitors. I went one time on my own and just said, hey guys, I'm sorry I only come here when VIPs are visiting. I just came today to hang out and learn. And as I'm learning, I went around the room, made everyone talk. Say something. No, sir, I don't want to say anything. Please say something. No, sir, I'm not going to say anything. Damn it, say something. So you shock him into it, and the young guy says, I remember a time when we used to talk to the teams. And for us, the teams are where the magic happens, right? That's where I told you the story of the guy, best day of my Army career. And he didn't know it when he said it, but it was an epiphany for me. Wait a minute. We have an entire organization that's charged with building solutions that isn't talking to the people that need them. He said, I remember a time, and he was only like 20, right? I'm like, you remember a time. I remember a time, but it struck a chord with me because I remembered a time when I was 20. So we created not an organization, absolute wrong term. We created an idea about, I'm going to put 3 hours on the calendar once a quarter, and we're going to bring together these developers, and we're going to bring together the teams, and we'll put out a call for papers and ideas, and it's going to be teams and developers talking. I'll be there. You're not briefing me. I might not say anything. I do have a lot of questions, but you're just going to talk. What are we all doing? Why are we doing it? How can we do it better? What's the future look like? And so, true to form, whenever you come up with an idea, you know you've got a good idea in Army Cyber if someone gives it a Star Wars nickname. Okay, so we gave it a Star Wars nickname. I think somewhat apropos, if I've got Scariff right, there were some bad things happening on that island. We'd like to think we're doing good things, or that planet. And it was also, I think, based on a spelling mistake, which I think is common for how we name things in cyber as well. But there we are. So we gave it a name. We've kind of tried to keep it weird. When we meet these things, we're doing them virtually. There's people dressed up like characters. And all that is really my way of saying, look, this is not a boardroom meeting. This is not a PowerPoint briefing. It's your event. The only reason I'm doing it is because I have the ability to bring you together. And more importantly, I have the ability to listen and elevate your good ideas into this organization. And so for me, grassroots is where it's at in technical organizations. And nothing in your meeting structure typically, and this is probably true in and out of government, nothing in your meeting structure is going to get after this. You've got to find a new way to get after this. And there are cool ways, like make an open bar, feed them well, give them Monster. I think all those things are true, but is the leader of the organization, my epiphany, am I doing my job to make sure that I'm involved in forcing this to happen? Because it doesn't naturally happen. And not forcing it in a way of authority. Yep, we wear uniforms to work. It's mostly because we don't want to make bad choices in what we would otherwise wear. My son told me today when I left, he goes, "You're not cool." I'm like, okay, thanks. but am I doing my job? Are we creating this? I think it must be cultivated. That's my lesson, and I'm sticking to it. And I would stick to it outside of government as well. A good friend of mine, his name is Nate. He ran Endgame for a while. He's still associated with the company. We talked about this topic. We talked about culture. And I said, is this, I've visited places where the appearance of grassroots happens. He goes, no, it's not as easy. It's not isolated to the government. And he had come out of the Marine Corps, so he had a definite point of comparison. My fourth lesson. I did not take this picture, although some in the room would accuse me of being old enough for black and white photography. The reason I use this picture is because of the camouflage net. And years ago, I read a book called Spit-Shine Syndrome. Chris Basford is a great, really he studies and is an expert in Clausewitz, but he wrote a book about the organizational irrationality of the United States Field Army. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of irrational behavior in the Army over time. He was focused in a certain period of time, but a story that has always resonated with me, and I've never forgotten from this book. I can almost go to the page and say, you need to read this chapter. Inspector goes out to a unit in the field, right? How effective is that firing crew? How effective is, what's the precision, the rate of fire, and how secure are they? How mobile are they? Well, one of the questions on the checklist is, do they have their camouflage properly erected? Check. Yes. Camouflage is up. It looks like it's over the thing. Well, the interesting thing about camouflage these days, in the day of his writing, was they have two sides. One for winter, one for summer. But the question wasn't asked, is the right side showing up? The question was just asked, is it erected? Yes. Okay, well, my point is, I think that in the security industry, we can get drawn into blind compliance pretty quickly. Are we doing things? Yes. Are we doing them the right way? Whoa, wait. You just asked me if I'm doing it, right? We're good at that, right? The military is good at creating checklists and having inspections. We have a cyber readiness inspection that we conduct. I've been through them on the receiving end. I've watched us now deploy our experts out to check units, and you can get an 80% on that inspection. That's a good grade, right? Got me through high school. You can get an 80%. You're still wide open to folks like you. So, this compliance idea, to me, I'm struggling as I look at this team I'm with, and I'm like, we're worried about, are we doing this? Are we doing that? What's the outcome? It's all about risk, right? So we're trying to get to this model of, compliance and risk, and how does that balance itself? Well, I think left to its own devices, I know this from my 28 years of experience in the Army, any bureaucracy, by definition, and unfortunately, we are part of one, but any bureaucracy, there are great things. There are reasons bureaucracies exist, but after a while, they creep towards compliance. They would tend to do things that way. Well, my lesson is I can't allow that to happen in a cyber formation. I still need oversight. We're still going to behave ethically. We have rules and laws and all those things, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about disciplined initiative. Okay? Disciplined initiative is an idea in the Army that says, do you know enough to know when your orders are no longer valid and you're now going to do something different? Do you know enough to identify when the conditions have changed, when there is a new threat or a new opportunity that you can seize and take advantage of rather than wait to be told? Do we know enough about what's happening at our borders with attacks happening to say, well, I'm going to move now laterally and defend here rather than wait, hey, 5 days later, we were penetrated, go clean that up. Wait a minute, I'm seeing something happening. Again, in the work that we were doing, there was an operation and a young officer saw something as an opportunity, identified it, acted. I was in the room, acted, did something. the threat had changed. And in the world that you operate in, I don't imagine there's ever a day that you could be working in cyberspace and not have the dynamic changing. By definition, it's changing so rapidly that we need folks to have this idea of discipline initiative. What I thought I was going to see, I'm not seeing. Or the network has changed. Or this threat actor is moving much, much faster. What used to be a day or two is now hours, right? So we want this, but it's not necessarily easy to achieve when compliance has its attractive nature. And I think compliance is something that exists in and out of the military. I can impugn myself and my own experience about why you tend towards checklist-driven events, but creating this discipline initiative, to me, is something that I think is going to keep us wholly relevant in the space. And what you have to do is, rather than scrutinize that action of the young officer, you need to reward it. Was it legal? Was it moral? Was it, in fact, held by a higher authority, assuming the risk? I held that person responsible for action, but I am going to be accountable for the risk. If you do that well, right, judicious risk-taking, understanding that, creating that force, that's what we're working on in Army Cyber. Because if we don't, we'll be too slow to be relevant in some spaces of cyberspace, defense and offense, right? Okay, I have no more prizes to give, but does anyone know who that is? Okay. Gustavo Dudamel. He is the conductor at that time of the LA Philharmonic. And he was playing the violin up until age 18, and he dropped the violin and started to practice the art of conducting. And he was somewhat of a prodigy, if you will, but he was a master. He was hired by the LA Philharmonic in his 20s. And so please don't take away that I think I'm that guy in the middle with the baton. That's not the point of this slide. The point of this slide are those musicians in the foreground. They are masters because they have practiced. Yes, indeed. And I do think that mastery takes time. But I'm not saying that if you conduct 10,000 hours of cyber, you will be a master. I believe that that mastery has to arrive by understanding it to the point where, in the words of Nina Kohlers, who is she's written on innovation and mastery, has come to speak to parts of the Department of Defense and said, hey, you guys have this wrong. It's not about how many times did you do it. It's how well do you understand it. We'd like to talk about, think outside the box. She would say, no, no, no. You have to understand the box so well that you can reconstruct it. And so the picture to me is a leader, the conductor, who understands music so well that he can construct it, deconstruct it, and reconstruct it. And my observation in a technical force is don't get head faked by rank in the military or seniority in an org chart or pay levels, whatever that, whether it's your salary or your parking spot. Don't get head faked by any of that. There are folks that I work with that I listen to that are sergeants first class, right? That I listen to above many, many people who the organization would have you, well, but he's a captain, he's a major, he's a lieutenant colonel, he's a colonel. I don't care. Bobby knows more than some of those people are ever going to know about cyber. There are people in the room, Bobby just happens to not be here. There's some cute smiles in the back like, are you going to mention me? No, I'm not. There are people in the middle who are those people to me. You ask around about the people I go to talk to throughout the day, it's not about rank. I get invited to enough meetings with General Fogarty, I don't need more of them. And if he watches this on YouTube, I know why those meetings happen. We have a job to do to run this thing called Army Cyber. But my point is, don't allow an organization to head fake what's happening at the grassroots. The mastery that might have been built. People are now coming into our force that have years of experience in private industry that have vaulted them beyond what we would otherwise spend a couple years training. And we need to recognize that and take advantage of it. It's hard to do. We do some things in the military, but Paul Kraft at the Cyber Center is trying to open those apertures. Direct commissioning is an idea like that. These summer internship programs are ideas like that. This discourse, right, between things happening down at the Georgia Cyber Center, this university, across the river, University of South Carolina, BSides itself, these dialogues, we've got to continue to do them because this mastery can't be brought about by ourselves. We're experimenting with what it looks like to do training with industry at a more rapid rate. Rather than say, I'm going to send you to one company for 1 year, why can't I send somebody out to a company and work with private industry for 3 months on a hard problem? Get around that spider web of talent, learn what that looks like in practice, and bring that back and help us solve hard problems and continue to do that. And I think there's benefits to both sides of that relationship. So that's what I would like to offer in terms of this. Thinking outside the box is interesting. Reconstructing the box is important. And my lesson has been, I've got to learn enough about the musicians in the foreground where I can collide them together and make sure that what we're trying to have as an output sounds a little bit more like symphony and less like, disconnectedness. That's the effort. So, okay. That's part 2. Episode 3. Oh, yes. Thank you, ma'am. Episode 3. 3 phrases taken from a book. So the little footnote that's there that says, it just says, hey, I read a book, and I thought, wait a minute, I want to remember these 3 words. I've just recently finished this book. Now, it's not hard to read. It's a short book, but it's very, very interesting, the takeaway. Anybody speak Russian, Persian, Farsi, Chinese? Which one? What does it say? Yeah, it's the three warfares, right? So thank you. Russian up top is, the same idea about active measures. In the middle, Persian Farsi talking about the guardians of the cleric. But all these ideas are about the condition we find ourselves, I believe, today, are that we have some adversaries who think completely different about how to challenge the United States. We've spent 20 years in counterterrorism. There's been some recent reflections upon that. There's been recent changes in our presence and locations associated with that. Along the way, we had some adversaries who were thinking, how can I best challenge the United States below the level of armed conflict? How can I make this difficult for them? How can I start to get them to maybe question the efficacy of their own democracy? How can I do things across a broad range in which cyber is an element? It's not the only element in these theories of irregular warfare, information warfare. Chinese include legal warfare. So these ideas of our adversaries thinking deeply about how to impact the security and social structure of the United States isn't a new thing. And they're running at a pace that I think we would agree is somewhat daunting. And we're thinking through what that means. At the same time, these are significant, well-equipped countries, but the barrier to entry is low, right? That is the Radio Shack in Gardez, Afghanistan, 2011. Next to the Target, which has better hours, apparently, it's open. But the barrier to entry in cyber is now low. It doesn't take much, right? Some of our adversaries are not large nation states. You don't have to be a large nation state in order to compete or cause disruption in this space. And some observations from that perspective. The rate at which we are discovering 0 days, right? That the O-Day numbers, 66 in a year, is that the statistic that we could cite? Is that happening because we're getting better at detecting them? Is that happening because there are more deployed? Are they being chained together to make life more difficult? Can we react to that? What's the speed at which that market is having an effect? So if you look at that big epiphany, the second one is ransomware. That everybody in the room has been affected by it in the United States recently, correct? And you, among many, probably know that all too well in terms of the speed at which that is happening now. And the targets. Yesterday night, I watched a video. Jenna Easterly talked a little bit about CISA. She talked about the organization. But really, if you haven't watched it, really cogent summary about ransomware, its impact, and what we have to do together, publicly and privately, in order to remain relevant in that space, to counter the impact of it. But recently, hospital targets, hit, lucrative target, sensitive data. But the speed, I think, of interest to those in the room, the speed at which those things are happening, penetrate, establish the beachhead, expand laterally, persist, deploy, 6 hours, 5 hours, okay? How do you combat that? How do we combat that? That is a significant idea. And then the idea of, for us, information or attribution of information is, what are we doing to make sure we're sharing that? And so I think there's been a little bit of a revolution in that idea between the government and private industry, the strong, important partnerships that the national security and cybercom have, the notifications that are occurring, because the idea of attribution in this space is becoming all the more important, all the more difficult to detect, but all the more important. So from my vantage point, the world, obviously, the pace at which our adversaries are trying to impact us, the scope with which they're looking at it, whether they are nation state or unknown actor, whether they're a criminal or someone who has strategic objectives in mind, all those things have changed the landscape, and I don't think that's going to slow down at any time soon. So, a few things. And this is where I'm just going to dangle some of these ideas so then the group here can go get their tech on. You can go learn about, I think there's Raspberry Pi going on, there's Windows management going on, there's Nando's going to talk about PowerShell, that'll be awesome. There's a lot happening. In the future, I think these are areas where we will have to continue to work together and collaborate. You go to a lot of conferences and you hear talk about AI machine learning. We talk about it internal to the Department of Defense, the Department of the Army, quite a bit. But what does it mean when applied? How do we apply the ideas? How are we going to apply it to vulnerability research so that we can get faster? What are we going to do with the algorithms of defense so that if everything's being machine written these days, or there's a lot being machine written, how do we apply that to get better at active defense so that our algorithms can be relevant faster and we can have the human mind solving other problems? But guide this applied or MI-AL idea into algorithms with the data scientists that are tuned to the organization to be relevant. That's an area I think we're going to have to stay in partnership with. Trusted cloud solutions. Clearly there's a DoD cloud strategy. There's a lot in there in terms of what does that look like? Who secures the cloud? Who secures what's going on in the cloud, right? Well, somebody might secure the cloud, but then when you're in it, you've got your own conundrum. But what does that look like for us? How do you, ultimately there's, in the middle there in the information dominance thing, we're always going to be in this privacy and security realm, this transparency versus, do you lock everything down? Do you keep it open? Well, there's mysteries about the cloud, right? It's just this big open thing. Well, no, it's probably overly secured in some areas and under in others. Information dominance and influence, that's a term of art for us right now in the Army, information dominance, information advantage. But what does it look like, security of elections? There's an example. There are actors who are trying to influence the confidence in U.S. elections. Well, what does that look like? Is that an information campaign? Does it involve cyber? How are we participating in that? What does it mean for social media space? What do you trust and not trust? How do we get along in that space to make sure that we are remaining unified in our idea about protecting the election? Privacy and security is always in balance. And then imposing cost, put in quotes because it is, again, something we talk about, is what are we doing in this ecosystem of what an adversary is? There's a person, there's infrastructure, right? There's ideas, there's support. How do you go after that? What parts of that are you going to siphon off to have an effect? And how do we together, privately, publicly, think about how are we imposing cost on those that are trying to do us harm? So there's some areas that I would hope you would all take some time to think about what you can do to help us. Finally, I'm going to leave with this. This is a picture of a route clearance platoon, well, part of it. 4 young men in this case who were getting their combat action badge, standing in front of multi-million-dollar vehicles that we use to go out and hunt less than multi-million-dollar threats to U.S. and allied soldiers called IEDs. These men and others and women went out on the roads of Afghanistan every day doing route clearance. Why did they do it? Well, they did it because of the person on their left and right, or the person who's following in the next convoy, all to meet the mission. The mission they had was to help protect their brothers and sisters at arms. Well, the mission, right, I go back to where I started. I gave out some t-shirts, I gave out some coffee mugs, we talked about $1 billion of investment, we talked about beautiful buildings, and all of that is important. The two things that I would argue, I hope I tried to convey and conveyed well enough, the two difference makers, the talent and the mission. And again, this is not an enlistment speech, but we're onto something in Army Cyber. We're attracting the right talent, we're growing more, we're training it, we're trying, as I talked about, to apply, making sure we don't fall victim to the wrong things about organizations and create an atmosphere where the mission will attract the talent, will provide them the best weapons platform, and will continue to work with all our partners, put them out in industry, bring them back, have dialogues like this, spend days, weekends, talking about what are we going to do together to make sure that we are more secure, doing things at a rate of speed that is relevant, and having an effect in imposing cost on our adversaries. I have 6 minutes remaining before she throws a football at my head. What are your questions? Oh, he has a question? Yeah. Yes, are you in Compo 2 or 3? Okay. Which one? Okay. Okay, just to be clear, the National Guard? Okay, so what his question is, if you didn't hear it, was, and he admits to the fact that he's asking an inside baseball question, I think, but he's saying, what's going on with, how does my plan fit with Guard and Reserve, National Guard, U.S. Army Reserve? It's a great and fair question. And I should have mentioned it earlier. In this case, I'll give you an example. The example is this. Underneath the operational control of the organization I work for, there is a cyber warfare company of the National Guard that is fully around. Are you on that team? No. Yeah, they're all up there. Okay. So I'm explaining to you who you are, but for the rest of the group. So we brought this team out of doing some incredible work in their civilian jobs, right? I haven't inventoried the new team. They're coming in now. There's one currently. Some of them work within the national security apparatus already. Some of them do pen testing in real life. Some of them just sit and do coding because that's a hobby, but they're trying to get paid for it. But more often than not, it's this really cool, unique assemblage of talent that the Army might not otherwise have gotten. And they have years of experience. They have a level of mastery that is unique. And we call them up to active duty for a year, and we bring this company on, and we employ them in our fight, and they're doing some amazing work. The current company has been the CWC, the current cyber warfare company of the National Guard, has been involved in supporting operations and forward deployed locations every day for the past year. And if you talk to them, their level of morale about what they're doing, through the roof. They'll stay at work. You don't have to tell them to stay at work. You have to tell them to go home, right? We've moved them a couple times. They don't care. They don't care about the $336 million building. They want to operate. They want to have an impact. They want to contribute. And they arrive with such tremendous talent. So the strategy is we've got a plan where that's going to happen over time. General Fogarty meets with the Chief of the Reserve and the National Guard. We're talking about what this looks like in the long term. So the takeaway for everyone else in the room, other than the people who now work for me, is this. If you want to connect to us, we're not a mystery, and if we are, that's my fault, and I'll fix it. But if you want to join the National Guard, you can still do your civilian job. Great. You know, you'll come together a few times a year, and we might activate for a year of service with Joint Force Headquarters. Wonderful. If you want to go in the reserves, if you want to join active duty, if you want to see if you can direct commission, if you want to enlist, again, we're doing that at my truck after this. But there's opportunity. And look, if we are a mystery, if United States Army Cyber is a mystery to you, by way of example, I'm with you. By way of example, there are some folks in Augusta, Georgia, who believe that everyone that lives on Fort Gordon, and I do, that we all live in that big building that you see from Bobby Jones Expressway. That is a hospital, and we don't all live there. But if we're a mystery, I'm happy to help solve that. So if you want to connect with us, if you want to be a part of it, if you want to see it more, you can also Army Cyber Chief, the Chief of Army Cyber, Paul Kraft. But we got people who will follow up questions. My name is Ryan Janovic, and ryan.janovic@gmail. And if you can't spell Janovic, I couldn't for the first 15 years of my life, but it's Janovic. If I can help you answer any questions that I didn't answer today, I'd be happy to. I'm out of time. Okay, thank you very much.